You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based podcast that spotlights Black women who replace silence with storytelling around pregnancy and infant loss and infertility. Black women experience miscarriage and stillbirth 4 to 5 times more likely than white women, according to the NIH and CDC. Whether you've experienced a miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, are trying to conceive, or have an infertility diagnosis, you will learn about resources and strategies to heal, gain clarity, peace, hope, and find an empowering path forward after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee, and you will hear me interview sisters in loss who have healed from such a painful and traumatic experience by sharing their testimonies and stories to inspire and help others turn their pain into their purpose. Now let's get started. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Good to be here.
Yes, I would love for you to introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Deze. I am currently a content creator, specifically a blogger. My blog's address is bydeze.com. And I create content about lifestyle. I really started by talking about my fertility journey, my journey with endometriosis, and just kind of my journey with pregnancy loss, and talking about my feelings about it and coping with it and the journey. And since then, the blog has really blossomed to just talk about all things lifestyle, all things wellness. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm doing right now.
Perfect. But you have a story and a journey to motherhood. So take us back on that journey and share with us your lost story.
Okay, will do. So what is it, 2022 now? So back in 2017 is when I got married. And around that time, me and my husband, we told ourselves, we'll just wait a few months. We'll wait, give it 6 months, and then we'll, have the kids and do all that stuff that we thought was going to be so straightforward and so easy. I actually got pregnant about 3 months after we got married, and that ended in a miscarriage, which was heartbreaking, but was short-lived because I actually ended up getting pregnant after that miscarriage, like right after. So since miscarriage is quite common, it was something that I was able to kind of just process and get over and just become excited again. So unfortunately, that pregnancy ended in ectopic pregnancy. So a lot of pain, a lot of hospital visits, a lot of labs. And we ended up resolving that ectopic pregnancy with methotrexate, so 2 shots of methotrexate. And that was definitely one of the most traumatic losses that I had, just because that really signaled that something was, the first loss wasn't a fluke. Something was definitely wrong. And then after that, we went through a period of time, I don't know if it was because of the methotrexate, but we went through a period of time where we really weren't able to conceive for like a year. And then when we started, when we were able to conceive again, unfortunately, they kept on ending up in either miscarriage, very early losses, like around 6 weeks, and or they would be pregnancies of unknown location. So kind of ectopic pregnancy, but they never kind of identified where the ectopic was. So it got named as pregnancy of unknown location. And up until this day, I haven't had any successful pregnancies. So I've had a total of 8 losses, which have been attributed to, just a variety of things, endometriosis being a big one, and the inflammation that comes with it. And it's definitely still on this journey. It's not, unfortunately, something that I can talk about in the past tense, but that's where we are right now.
Let's talk about just how have you processed all of this grief and loss, and, what tools have you added to your toolbox? Really, how have you dealt with all of this?
Yeah, I'm glad you used that term in terms of like tools and dealing, like what tools do you have in your toolbox? Because that's, a terminology that I love to use just when I'm talking to people about coping with really difficult experiences and difficult periods of times in your life. But yeah, it was really hard with my first and second loss back in 2017. that was actually, it was like towards the end of that year, or actually the next year, that I started my blog, because it was very isolating. So that was a feeling that I really remember, especially because around that time we had moved to, me and my husband had moved to a whole different area of the US. We weren't around any family, mine or his. And it was just a very isolating time, because even though I've come to find that miscarriage and pregnancy loss is pretty common, it's also quite taboo, and a lot of people don't talk about it or share it freely. So it just felt like nobody had gone through what I was going through, and quite the opposite. It felt like everybody was getting pregnant and getting to keep their pregnancy. So go on babycenter.com and kind of read the experiences there and the threads there. I started joining like Facebook groups about recurrent miscarriage and things like that, listening to podcasts like yours, and just trying to find or build a community of people that had gone through a similar thing, because it was very encouraging just to be able to have the feeling of like, I'm not some extraordinary case out in the world that can't be fixed. I don't have some problem that's so rare that nobody's ever gone through. There's really hope in trying to figure out, in realizing that, other people have walked this path and eventually has seen it to the end. So that's a huge coping strategy that I employed at first. And eventually I started my own blog and started writing and encouraging other women. And that helped, just kind of being on the other end of, encouragement. It felt like it gave the whole journey purpose. And then some other things that I did is just really dive deep into the world of positivity and mindset, and really discover how to be intentional about setting up your mindset to encourage you and to support you in the kind of life that you wish to live. So that was something I dived really deep in, and something I talk about a lot in my blog as well. So those are some of the things, along with, some of the more traditional coping mechanisms like therapy, medications when need be, that have really helped me to, and it's been a journey. I definitely encourage anybody kind of in the midst of it. Like, you don't have to know everything and do everything at once. It's just nice to pick up one tool here and there and just put it in your toolbox for whenever you need it. So you can just, kind of collect the tools like Pokemons. Just as you are able to, you just grab one, perfect it, learn it, explore it, and then, put it away for a rainy day or whatever you need to do.
At some point in your journey, have you stopped trying to conceive and thought about going down the path of like fertility treatments?
Yeah, for sure. So that has been most recently, I believe, after around the 7th loss. Actually, we saw a reproductive endocrinologist that was just like, you know what? I'm thinking that a possible cause of all of these losses is that maybe you just have poor quality eggs, which can be, a result of endometriosis and the chronic inflammation. So he was saying, if poor quality eggs are the case, then it might be a good idea for you to go through IVF, just so that you can, examine your eggs and make sure they're good quality before you implant them. So that started us on a journey of looking at assisted, reproductive strategies. And so we have been, kind of looking into IVF and things like that. And we've been working on that. Unfortunately, we did come to a place where I discovered we harvested the eggs and all that stuff. And then we came to a place where I also discovered, that my lining is an issue. So that was a whole different hurdle and difficulty, and to really grasp, just to have another hurdle in place after, we paid all the monies and done all the appointments to get the eggs together, which is already one step that you really didn't want to do. So that really led me to a place where I feel like was one of my lowest. That was a significant period of time where me and my husband just had to like, okay, how are we going to kind of live our lives in a way where it's not centered on trying to conceive, just trying to live the best life that we can live, with trying to conceive as kind of like a side goal, not the center of our lives, because they had become that for a while. And when trying to conceive is literally the center of your life, that means any failures you have becomes like personal failures. It's huge. So, and that was definitely diminishing our quality of life. So yeah, around the 7th or 8th loss is really when we started exploring like IVF and trying to kind of readjust, where trying to conceive would be in our lives. Does that answer your question?
No, it definitely does answer the question, because I think that what I was hoping that you shared, what you did, is that, it's almost like, because it's a journey. You go 2 steps forward, you may get bumped 4 steps back. Mm-hmm. Then you go 2 steps more forward in the journey, you may receive another thing about bad news. And like you said, you received this news about your lining, and it kind of stopped you on your part of the journey for you all to reevaluate and say, hey, it's me and you, right? Like I don't want to not, focus on the marriage and the relationship and the partnership with this goal that we both want. And, then we start blaming each other when we still get bad news, So I thank you for your transparency on that, because I think people don't realize that sometimes we can take a pause, especially if we get some bad news, and just say, hey, we can pause right now. Like we don't have to move forward. We can pause and sit and pray and meditate and just figure out let's center us back before we proceed forward, when we know that this is a goal, but it should not be our sole focus. So I'm happy that you shared that. And I think that ultimately, especially with us who have underlying conditions like endometriosis and fibroids and polycystic ovarian syndrome, going through, when you hear fertility treatments or alternative reproductive technology, we think of money and how much it's going to cost and putting all this effort into this, and the outcome may not be what you want. So I would love for you to just share about just the decision process that you all went through to do that after your reproductive endocrinologist told you about possibly your eggs being a quality issue. What was the deciding factor to move forward with, spending money? Because it's not something that a lot of people have disposable income that they can spend $30,000 on IVF. Like, it's expensive. It's not an easy decision to come by. And it's truly a leap of faith. As much as people like, a lot of people look negatively on folks who go through fertility treatments, it's still a God thing, y'all. Like, God, it's not something that just happens like this. It's still a God thing. God is using medicine through doctors to do this, but it's still a God thing in order for the embryo to implant properly, to grow and mature within 5 days, and then implant properly. And then you get a positive pregnancy test. Like, it's still a journey. So I would love for you to share how you all came up with that decision to move forward with the process, because it is expensive.
Yeah. And I'm glad you asked that, because it definitely wasn't straightforward with us. I don't think that we were exactly on the same page, especially in the beginning, because, my husband is a bit more, I don't want to say level-headed, but I guess because of just like my personal issues and the very personal and specific trauma that I had incurred, not just emotionally, but also physically from all these losses, I felt a specific urgency when it came to trying to conceive. Every birthday just felt like a year of lost possibilities. Every birthday that he had felt like a year of he didn't get, his goal of being a father because X, Y, and Z. Every loss just felt like things were building up, and it just seemed like the one solution that would really end all of these problems is conceiving. So I'm a very goal-oriented person. So because of that, it was just like, okay, well, we're going to make this happen come hell or high water. Like, we're going to make this happen. Okay, so you want me to do IVF? That's what it's going to take. All right, no problem. All right, IVF, what's the first step? We're going to need to find this doctor, spend the money, no matter what we got to sacrifice, do this, do that, do this. And so I was very quick to jump on the bandwagon, whereas my husband wanted to be more deliberate and to plan more and save more. And it did cause, a bit of conflict in our marriage, because I felt like the urgency at which I was taking things was for his benefit. right? Even though for him, he'd feel more comfortable if we were to slow down, save a little bit more. And I felt like, I'm doing this for you. You don't even know. You're not even appreciating I'm doing this for the both of us, taking things by the horns and all of this stuff. So it was really a bit of a struggle. And I wouldn't even give myself credit to say that, I arrived at this enlightened realization where, we decided to agree on something. I feel like actually what happened is that everything came to a head where I had a bit of a crisis where it was just kind of like, I got some bad news after I started on the path for IVF, and it really crushed me. And it almost it was emotional or mental crisis because I just felt so down. I had to have sort of an intervention where it was just like, your health, your mental and emotional health is not worth the weight in which you're putting this. And I finally realized it. And that is what really put us on the same kind of page of what our priorities should be. So unfortunately, even though I would love to say that, we came to this agreement and we talked and discussed and decided on this particular timeline, it did take quite a lot for me to, kind of put things into perspective. But ultimately, we just did decide to make the investment. Thankfully, my husband and I, both work careers in healthcare. And so we were able, we have the means to be able to, put it into IVF. So that wasn't a huge obstacle as I imagine it is, is for other people. I would encourage other people to, be a bit more flexible when they're discussing timelines and priorities with their partners about that too. Okay, what's the root of your concern? You know what I'm saying? Not just, I don't want to do this, I do want to do this, but just like, is it financial? Is it that you're tired of trying? Is it you want to take a break? How long do you need? Because I think doing that would definitely have been more beneficial than the way that we approached it and how things finally kind of, happened.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. The other part of this journey is really going through and advocating for yourself, which I feel like you've done, especially through all of your losses. How have you advocated for yourself now, now that it's been, a few years and you're going through a whole different treatment compared to after that first loss, after that first ectopic pregnancy, that miscarriage and then ectopic pregnancy that you had?
So definitely advocating myself has really consisted of finding different sources of help when I felt like I wasn't getting the best help. Like, for example, we used to live in a different state when all of this happened. And unfortunately, it was a smaller community and they just did not have a lot of resources. So it wasn't like we had tons of IVF centers and reproductive endocrinologists around so you could hop from, one or the other. We really had just one main one in the city that we lived in. And so that was pretty much the only option. So I started going to them and I just felt like they were so nonchalant about my care. And unfortunately, I didn't have any other choice. So one way I would advocate for myself, and I encourage others to advocate for themselves if they feel like they're in that situation where they don't have a choice, is to do your research, right? So ask the questions, do your research, because one thing that I have found out is that even if, most of us don't have the medical background to really know the nitty gritty of everything going on. But at least if you do the research and you ask certain questions, you can get the mind of whoever is treating you jogging a little bit. You can kind of inspire them to kind of think a little bit more outside the box. And then you can also make sure that they know that you are paying attention. Right? Because a lot of what got me frustrated is just a lot of wait. It's just bad luck. And it's like, obviously, at this point, this is not just all bad luck. And it just felt like, they didn't have the same concern and urgency as I did. And that really bothered me. But I feel that we were able to make some progress just simply for the fact that, I was looking into things, asking questions, even if they were outlandish sometimes, like, have you thought about this? Did I do this test? Is there a possibility that this is a diagnosis that I might have? The chance that I might have another loss? What's the possibility? Have you had any other patients that have experienced what I've experienced? So just asking a lot of questions, even if, they might not seem open to it, just to kind of stimulate more conversation, stimulate more thought on their part, and for them to know that you're actually on your toes about your own care. Eventually, we moved to a different state, and we moved to a different city where I have much more resources. And so I was able to really seek out one of the top practitioners in reproductive, technology. And so that was another way in which I was able to advocate for us when we did have the blessing of having like different options, is, just looking for the top person and being open to switching when things aren't going the way that you want. I think easy to just think that the doctors that you're seeing know what's best. And a lot of times, they do have good rationale behind the decisions that they're making, but they're still human. So they still have limitations. And I had one instance recently, actually, where the doctor that I'm seeing, he was like, you know what? I'm kind of concerned about your lining, and I want to go in and, scrape all of it out and see how it's going to grow differently. And we decided on a specific procedure to do that. And it boggled my mind that happened, because in all the years I've been going through all these multiple losses, nobody ever decided to investigate my lining and say, let's scrape it all out and allow it to grow healthier. Maybe that's why, the implantation has not been successful. So practitioners are still human. Medical doctors are still human. So that means they don't know it all. That means that if you go to a different one, they might have a different perspective and approach to the problem than somebody that you've been going through. So it's definitely important to shop around if you need be, if you have the option to.
So after all of this, what do you do for self-care? Because, honey, you have been through it.
Yeah, that's a really good question. For self-care, I will say that I definitely dive deeply into my work with content creation and blogging and setting goals for myself. Like I mentioned already, I'm a goal-oriented person. So it makes me feel good to set and achieve goals. So whether those be small or large. So instead of making those goals fertility related, I decided to put those goals in other areas of my life. In my career and my aspirations and my various hustles. I also love to travel. I mentioned to you that I'm currently on a girls' trip out of the state that I live in. So it's definitely nice to be around friends and just laugh and enjoy yourself. And basically, those are two of the big things that I really just find contentment in and love to do. I love to make things with my hands. And I would say one thing that I'd like to recommend to people and that I found very therapeutic is finding a way to create, writing something or doing art or doing arts and crafts or just making something. Because I think that, when you go through loss and things and you're going through death and grief and not being able to grow and create a life, I think the process of creating has a therapeutic aspect to it. So finding, whether it be gardening or, maybe you adopt a dog, or finding a way to kind of bring and grow life in the world is definitely therapeutic.
So is love using your hands for different things to create stuff and watch something grow. So gardening is definitely a good,
for sure,
good modality for people to heal as they grieve. I would love for you. My last question is really just, what encouraging words can you leave those listening or watching who have gone through a similar journey, may have experienced recurrent losses, maybe have endometriosis or underlying condition, and are in that process of trying to conceive?
Yeah, definitely would encourage anybody in this position to keep going and to realize that, as cliche as it is, life is bigger than trying to conceive, right? And I don't mean to diminish anybody's trying to conceive journey. I really don't, because I understand how big it can feel and how important it can be. But at the same time, it's important to zoom out in your life, not to zoom in on the trying to conceive process, but to zoom out and really take in how big life is, how multifaceted you can be, how multifaceted your life can be. Everything that you have to bring to the world that God's like put in you, besides your ability to reproduce, trying to really just understand the scope of that and understand how big that is and really try to walk in it is so important. And it puts things into perspective and it makes it so much less of a hopeless situation. It also helps us to not really shut out other people, because I think it's really easy to just, feel embarrassed or shame and want to hide and want to isolate yourself. But when you realize how big the world is, it helps you to get out there, continue to make connections, spend time with your family and friends, and not allow the time to pass by while you're trying to conceive. You know what I'm saying? So that's definitely what I encourage everybody to do. And I'll be doing with you, so you're not alone.
Absolutely. So where can we connect with you after this episode?
You can connect with me on my blog. It's bydeze.com. I have an email group actually that you can subscribe on my page. And I talk a lot about positivity. I talk a lot about mindset. I talk a lot about self-talk and how to really transform the way that you talk to yourself in order to, live a better life, live a more positive life, live a more intentional life. There is definitely some blog posts on there about my fertility journey. I am working on creating a community specifically for those struggling with loss at miscarriagemommy.com. That's new and it'll grow and it'll hopefully flourish as time goes by. But you can also find my thoughts and words about miscarriage and loss there as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure of having you here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. For show notes, go to sistersinloss.com. To stay connected with us and join the Sisters in Loss community and receive my weekly newsletter, please go to sistersinloss.com/newsletter. That is sistersinloss.com/newsletter. Please rate and review this episode, and I will talk to you next week.